The alien queen believed she married a humble man, until she saw him in action. The sun of Urindor shone softly over the palace, painting its towering spires in gold and amber. The palace itself was a marvel, with crystalline walls that shimmered like water in the sunlight, and gardens filled with strange, luminescent plants that glowed faintly even during the day. This was the home of Queen Lyra, ruler of the Xipherians, a species known throughout the galaxy for their intelligence, beauty, and advanced technology. Lyra herself was a figure of grace and power, her presence commanding respect from everyone around her. Yet behind her calm and regal exterior, she carried a secret that few knew. Her husband, Jonas, was not a Xipherian at all. Jonas was human. He had come to Urindor years ago as part of a cultural and scientific exchange program. Initially, he had been an ordinary scholar, fascinated by Xipherian history, technology, and language. Over time, he had become indispensable to the palace, not because of his strength or skill in battle, but because of his mind and his ability to think in ways that the Xipherians rarely did. He was humble, quiet, and unassuming. To anyone who saw him walking through the palace halls, he seemed like an ordinary man who liked books and research, not a figure of intrigue or power. Lyra had been captivated by him from the very beginning. There was something in the way Jonas listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and treated every living being with respect. His humility, his patience, and his gentle nature drew her in. He never tried to impress anyone with flashy skills or dramatic gestures. Even in a world where appearance and power were highly valued, Jonas did not seek attention. For Lyra, he was a breath of fresh air, a reminder that strength did not always have to be loud or obvious. Their relationship had begun quietly. Jonas had been assigned to study the royal archives, and Lyra had occasionally visited him to ask questions about the history of her own people. They spent hours discussing ancient texts, star maps, and old legends. Their conversations had a rhythm that was comforting, a slow unfolding of trust and understanding. Soon, Lyra realized she admired him more than she expected. And when Jonas returned that admiration quietly and respectfully, they began to spend more time together outside official duties, exploring the palace gardens, walking under the glowing flora, or discussing the stars far above Urindor. The other members of the court assumed their relationship was nothing more than a friendship. Jonas did not assert himself in the usual ways the Xipherians did, and Lyra never flaunted her feelings. They were careful, patient, and private. Over time, Lyra had grown to rely on him not just as a companion but as a confidant. She shared with him her worries about the kingdom, her insecurities as a ruler, and the pressures she faced daily. Jonas listened, offered insights, and sometimes said nothing at all, letting her thoughts settle before gently guiding her to clarity. Despite his quiet demeanor, Jonas had moments that hinted at something far greater than his outward appearance suggested. He had a knack for noticing small details that others missed, a pattern in the movement of palace staff, a subtle change in the behavior of the Xipherian guards, or an inconsistency in the reports brought to the queen. On several occasions, when a minor problem arose in the palace, Jonas would quietly propose a solution that left the council in awe. He never sought recognition, always giving credit to the palace staff or attributing it to luck. Lyra noticed, of course, and found herself both amused and impressed. She began to understand that humility did not mean weakness, it could mask brilliance. It was early morning when the first unusual incident occurred. Jonas was walking through the eastern garden, observing the glow of the flora and noting the subtle changes in the light as the twin suns rose higher in the sky. The garden was usually calm, filled with the soft hum of Xipherian insects and the gentle rustle of leaves. But today, something was off. A faint vibration beneath his feet suggested movement, not the kind of movement from animals, but from mechanical devices. He knelt quietly, observing the ground, and noticed a small, hidden drone attempting to slip through the garden perimeter. Jonah's reaction was almost instinctive. He had no formal training in security or combat, yet he quickly analyzed the drone. Its design was unfamiliar, its technology sophisticated but imperfect. Using a small tool from his belt, he quickly disabled its circuits, rendering it harmless. When the palace guards arrived, alerted by the drone's presence, Jonas calmly explained what had happened and how it had been stopped. The guards were amazed, expecting a complicated procedure or an alert to the security systems, yet Jonas had resolved the problem silently, efficiently, and without fuss. Lyra observed the entire event from a balcony overlooking the garden. She had come to check on the morning routines and witness Jonas in action. Her initial thought had been that Jonas had merely noticed a minor security issue and helped out. But as she watched him, she realized that what he had done required more than observation. It required understanding, intuition, and quick judgment. He had acted decisively, creatively, and calmly under potential threat. She shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips. So humble, yet so capable, she murmured to herself. She had known Jonas to be intelligent, of course, but she had never considered that his intelligence could manifest in such practical, immediate action. In the past, she had assumed his talents were theoretical, suited for research and teaching rather than real-world application. Today, she realized she had underestimated him. The rest of the morning passed uneventfully, but a sense of unease lingered in the palace. Reports came in of unusual signals near the outskirts of the city, strange patterns that did not match any known traffic or communication. Lyra summoned her council, but before they could analyze the data fully, Jonas approached. He suggested a simple but effective way to track the anomalies using a combination of old sensor data and observational techniques that humans used back on Earth. His idea was initially dismissed by some of the Xipherian officials as unconventional, but Lyra quietly insisted they try it. By mid-afternoon, the anomaly was confirmed. A fleet of unknown ships was approaching Urindor. The council panicked, debating strategies, defensive measures, and diplomatic responses. Lyra remained calm, though her mind raced. She glanced at Jonas, who stood quietly beside her. He did not display fear, only focus. He suggested using the palace's environment, the terrain, the atmospheric conditions, and the city layout to predict the fleet's approach and plan the palace's defenses. His suggestions were clear, logical, and practical, yet unlike anything the Xipherians had considered. Lyra felt a mixture of admiration and surprise. She had married a man she believed to be humble and quiet, a scholar who preferred books over battles. Yet here he was, demonstrating insight, courage, and decisiveness. For the first time, she wondered if she truly knew him. His calm under pressure, his ability to see solutions where others saw only problems, was both thrilling and slightly unsettling. As evening approached, Jonas helped coordinate the palace preparations. Guards and staff followed his instructions with efficiency, their movements guided by his simple but effective planning. Lyra watched, feeling a growing sense of respect and perhaps a little awe. Jonas moved among the palace members with quiet authority, issuing guidance without commanding attention. His influence was subtle but unmistakable. That night, after the first wave of preparations was complete, Lyra and Jonas walked through the palace gardens once more. The twin moons were rising, casting silver light over the luminescent flora. The air was cool, the glow of the plants reflected in the pools of water scattered across the gardens. Lyra spoke softly, almost as if to herself. "You are far more remarkable than I imagined," she said. Jonas looked at her, his expression calm, his eyes reflecting the soft light. He shrugged modestly. "I do what I can," he replied simply. "I only try to help where it is needed." And as the moons climbed higher in the sky, she felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation for what was to come. Because she now understood that the quiet, humble man she married might not be so ordinary after all. And tomorrow, when the threats approaching Urindor reached the city, she would see just how extraordinary he truly was. The morning on Urindor began quietly, but the calm was deceptive. From a distance, the sensors scattered across the outskirts of the capital were picking up unusual energy signatures. Ships, dozens of them, fast and unfamiliar, were moving steadily toward the planet. The palace staff scrambled to verify the data, cross-referencing it with orbital scans and communication arrays. The air in the council chamber was tense, buzzing with anxiety and speculation. Queen Lyra stood at the head of the table, her posture regal, her expression calm but attentive. She scanned the reports with sharp eyes, taking in the details, absorbing the numbers, the flight paths, and the velocity patterns. The counselors, seasoned in diplomacy and military tactics, were visibly unsettled. None had ever seen ships with this combination of speed and unpredictability. Jonas stood near Lyra, quietly observing the same data. He did not speak at first, only watching the screens and the way the ships moved, his mind working in patterns that humans were familiar with, but that the Zypherians did not immediately recognize. Finally, he spoke. "They are approaching in a formation designed to confuse automated defenses," he said. His voice was calm, almost casual, but it carried a weight that made several counselors look at him with surprise. "If you rely only on sensors and pre-programmed intercepts, they can bypass most of your outer perimeter. Their speed suggests they expect you to react in a certain way. I suggest using terrain and environmental factors against them, rather than relying on your standard defenses. Your suggestions are untested, and we cannot risk improvisation when the palace itself is at stake. If we move unpredictably, even slightly, we can gain a tactical advantage." The outer city districts, normally rigid in their defensive routines, were subtly adjusted according to Jonah's instructions. Power fields were redirected, sensors repositioned, and emergency response teams coordinated not only according to preset protocols, but also according to the humans' improvisations. As the fleet drew closer, the palace observatory captured the first real images of the enemy. The ships were angular and dark, unlike any known design in Zypherian records. They moved with fluidity, shifting formation constantly. Jonas observed their pattern, noting slight irregularities in their approach. "They are advanced, yes," he murmured, "but not perfect. They overcompensate for automated responses. That is their weakness. We can exploit it." Using energy from redirected power nodes, the defensive grid created temporary blind spots that lured the scouts into traps. Within minutes, several Cravari vessels were disabled without direct confrontation. Lyra watched from the observatory deck, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. She had seen Jonas in minor crises before, but this was different. This was strategy in motion, live and effective against a real and deadly threat. She felt pride swelling in her chest, but also a sudden, sharp respect. The man she believed to be humble was far more than that. He was decisive, creative, and fearless when it mattered most. The next wave of ships arrived, larger and more numerous. This time, Jonas took a more active role. He coordinated small squads of palace guards and human volunteers, giving them instructions that seemed simple, but had layers of strategic depth. He paired faster units with sensor drones, sending them to positions that allowed them to intercept Cravari attacks before the main fleet even noticed. Some of the counselors whispered nervously, doubting the effectiveness of human improvisation. But the results spoke louder than words. The Cravari, expecting rigid defense patterns, found themselves repeatedly misdirected, their formations disrupted, and their attacks neutralized with minimal losses on the Erendor side. Every time a new attack came, Jonas adjusted the response, predicting enemy moves in a way that no Zypherian tactical program had been able to do. Lyra could not take her eyes off him. She saw how his calm demeanor contrasted with the chaos around him. While the generals shouted orders and the counselors argued over contingencies, Jonas moved among them quietly, assessing the situation, communicating efficiently, and acting decisively. There was a natural rhythm to his actions, almost instinctual, as though he had trained for this all his life. By midday, the palace began to realize something astonishing. Not only were the Cravari attacks being repelled, but the human strategies were beginning to change the enemy's behavior. Their ships, once confident and coordinated, began to falter, making errors in navigation and communication. The subtle traps set by Jonas forced them to react unpredictably, and with every small mistake, the defenders gained an advantage. One of the generals, a stern and disciplined Xipherian named Corvath, could no longer hide his astonishment. "I cannot believe it," he muttered. "This human, he is altering the battle in ways our best simulations never predicted. It is remarkable." The quiet man who had spent years in the palace library, who had laughed softly at Xipherian formalities and loved books more than weapons, was now proving himself indispensable in the defense of her kingdom. Despite the progress, the danger was far from over. The main Cravari fleet had arrived, larger and more powerful than the scouts. Their ships were armed with energy cannons capable of bypassing conventional shields, and their formations were designed to overwhelm the outer districts quickly. Lyra's mind raced. The council was in chaos again, debating how to respond, but Jonas remained calm, analyzing the fleet's approach, noting gaps, redundancies, and patterns. He spoke to Lyra quietly but with a tone that carried authority. "We cannot stop them all at once, but we can choose the battles. We can force them into zones where their strength counts for less and ours counts for more. It will require coordination and trust. Direct the defenses, and I will ensure the council supports every decision you make." He coordinated energy shields, rerouted power, and used natural terrain, hills, water channels, and dense foliage, to channel enemy movements into traps. He even suggested temporary evacuation routes to protect civilians without revealing weaknesses to the enemy. The result was extraordinary. The Cravari fleet, expecting straightforward defenses, found themselves caught in a web of carefully orchestrated maneuvers. Ships were disabled, pilots confused, and formations broken apart. Each time the enemy attempted a new strategy, Jonas had anticipated it, turning the attack back against them in creative ways. Lyra could hardly believe what she was seeing. Her mind raced with admiration and disbelief. The man she had married, whom she thought she knew so well, was demonstrating a level of tactical genius that even the Xipherian generals could barely comprehend. And yet, he remained modest, never claiming credit, never seeking recognition. He acted simply because it needed to be done, because he could make a difference. Hours passed and the day turned into evening. The palace, though strained and battered in some sectors, had held its ground. The Cravari had been repelled, their scouts destroyed, their main fleet frustrated and unable to gain control. The city's citizens, once fearful, began to recognize that their defenders, guided by Jonah's strategies, were capable of defending them. As night fell over Urindor, Lyra found herself standing beside Jonas on a balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons rose in the sky, casting pale silver light over the palace and its gardens. The air was heavy with the scent of night-blooming flora, and the faint hum of distant machinery mixed with the soft rustle of leaves. "You were incredible today," Lyra said softly, her voice filled with awe. Jonas shook his head, modest as always. "I only did what I could," he replied. "The defense was a group effort. The guards, the council, the volunteers, they all followed directions. I only tried to think differently." She realized now that Jonah's humility had never been weakness. It had been patience, observation, and quiet strength. She had believed she knew him, but today she saw a side of him that was extraordinary. A man who could think, act, and lead in ways no one expected. For the first time, she understood that the human she married was not merely humble or ordinary. He was brave, clever, and resilient, capable of standing in the face of overwhelming odds and turning the tide through intelligence and creativity alone. And tomorrow, she knew, the challenges would only grow. The Cravari fleet would not give up easily. But with Jonas by her side, guiding, thinking, and acting, the queen felt a surge of hope and confidence. Perhaps the humans were more than guests, more than allies. They were a force that could change the balance of the galaxy itself. And she had married one of the finest of them. The sun rose slowly over Erendor, casting a pale golden glow across the palace and the city. Despite the calm morning, the tension in the air was thick. The Kravari fleet had retreated the previous night, but only temporarily. Scouts reported that reinforcements were on the way, larger and better armed than before. Queen Lyra stood in the central command hall, surrounded by her generals and advisors, her expression calm yet focused. The palace had survived the first wave, but she knew the true test had yet to come. Jonas moved among the officers quietly, reviewing maps and energy distribution grids. Though his outward demeanor remained humble, his mind worked rapidly, calculating probabilities, predicting movements, and adjusting strategies. He had spent the night analyzing the Kravari tactics, noting patterns in their attacks that the Zypherians had failed to anticipate. "They rely on predictability," he said softly, pointing to a section of the holographic display. "Every time their drones are engaged, the main fleet pauses briefly, recalibrates. We can use that pause to our advantage. We need to divide their attention, force them to spread out and target their communications. Our weapons can damage their ships, but they are fast and well protected. If we split our forces, we risk more than we gain. That is our advantage." Each group had a clear objective: intercept scouts, disable communication nodes, or manipulate the terrain to slow the main fleet. Jonah's instructions were precise but flexible, allowing for quick adaptation if the Kravari reacted unexpectedly. By mid-morning, the enemy approached again. This time, the Kravari moved with more caution, aware that their previous tactics had failed. Jonas observed their formations and noted subtle hesitations and gaps in their approach. He gave swift instructions to the teams, guiding them like a conductor directing an orchestra. The first clash was sudden and intense. Kravari scouts attempted to breach the city's outer perimeter, firing energy pulses at the defensive shields. Jonas had anticipated their path and had prepared an ambush. Small energy decoys and redirected shield pulses funneled the scouts into narrow corridors, where agile units disabled them before they could reach the city. Lyra watched from the observation deck, heart pounding with a mixture of pride and fear. She had expected Jonas to assist with strategy, but what she saw now surpassed anything she had imagined. He moved calmly among chaos, making split-second decisions that were both clever and daring. Every maneuver he suggested gave their side an advantage. Every action disrupted the enemy's expectations. The Kravari main fleet followed closely behind their scouts. Jonas quickly adjusted the defensive lines, predicting the fleet's path based on their speed and formation. He ordered the redirection of power to specific shield nodes, creating temporary blind spots that lured enemy ships into traps. Explosions erupted in the distance as Kravari vessels collided or were disabled, their pilots caught off guard. Some of the Zypherian generals were stunned. They had been trained to anticipate enemy movements with precision, yet Jonah's methods, though unconventional, were achieving results they could not have predicted. Even the most disciplined officers found themselves following his lead, unable to resist the logic of his strategy. As the battle progressed, Jonas took more direct action. He led a small strike team into the city outskirts, using lightweight hover vehicles to intercept enemy drones. The humans and Zypherians under his command moved with careful coordination, striking with precision, and retreating before the Kravari could react. Jonah's leadership was subtle but effective. He gave guidance and confidence without asserting dominance. At one point, a Kravari commander appeared in a larger ship, scanning the city for weaknesses. Jonas noticed its approach and devised a plan on the spot. Using the terrain, he led his team to a hidden position, then directed them to activate energy pulses that reflected off crystalline structures, creating the illusion of multiple units. The Cravari ship, confused by the false signals, fired prematurely and exposed itself to counterattack. A coordinated strike from Jonah's team disabled the vessel entirely, marking a turning point in the engagement. Lyra felt a mix of awe and disbelief. The man she had believed to be humble, the quiet scholar she had married, was now demonstrating extraordinary courage, intelligence, and leadership. He was not merely following a plan. He was improvising, adapting, and mastering the battle as it unfolded. Hours passed, and the battle reached a fever pitch. The Cravari adapted, attempting to change tactics, but Jonas anticipated many of their moves. He communicated with multiple squads simultaneously, issuing instructions, adjusting strategies, and ensuring that every action contributed to the larger objective, protecting the palace and the citizens of Urindor. During a critical moment, one of the teams was trapped by a sudden Cravari flanking maneuver. Jonas acted instantly. He directed a secondary squad to create a distraction, while he personally led a counterstrike through a narrow path, outflanking the enemy and freeing the trapped units. The maneuver was risky, exposing him to potential danger, but it succeeded flawlessly. The trapped squad was rescued, and the Cravari forces were pushed back. Lyra, watching from the observation deck, felt her admiration deepen. Jonah's calmness under pressure, his ability to think several steps ahead, and his willingness to take calculated risks were qualities she had never seen in any Xipherian officer. He was demonstrating in real time why humans had survived on Earth despite countless challenges: adaptability, ingenuity, and courage. The Cravari commander, frustrated by repeated failures, began targeting Jonas directly, recognizing that he was the source of the chaos. Jonas, however, remained composed. He led his team to higher ground, using the city's structures and natural terrain to shield their movements. From this vantage point, he directed energy pulses and drone strikes that disrupted the enemy's formation, further tipping the battle in their favor. By late afternoon, the Cravari were in full retreat. Their formations had collapsed, their ships damaged, and their morale shaken. Jonas continued to coordinate defenses, ensuring that no stray vessels could cause further damage. The palace, though marked by the battle, had held firm, largely due to his leadership and quick thinking. Lyra approached Jonas as the immediate danger passed. Her eyes shone with respect and awe. "You were incredible," she said softly. "I never imagined a human could do this well, in the face of so many enemies." Jonah's ability to see opportunities, anticipate enemy actions, and act decisively had been the key to their survival. His quiet strength and creativity had turned the tide of the battle. She realized now that she had underestimated him for years, mistaking his humility for simplicity, when in fact it masked an extraordinary mind and courageous heart. The citizens of Urindor emerged from shelters, witnessing the aftermath of the battle. Word spread quickly of Jonah's role in defending the city. Many spoke in awe of the human who had led squads of both humans and Xipherians, outthinking an enemy fleet that was technologically superior. For the first time, humans were seen not just as allies but as heroes, capable of feats that even the most advanced Xipherians could not have imagined. As night fell over the city, the palace was quiet but vigilant. Jonas walked beside Lyra through the palace gardens, the glow of the flora soft under the twin moons. He remained humble, but the weight of the day's events hung in the air. Lyra watched him, realizing that her admiration had grown into something deeper. She had married a man who was more than humble. He was brave, intelligent, and capable of extraordinary action when the moment demanded it. She knew that the Cravari would return, stronger and more determined. But she also knew that with Jonas by her side, they had a fighting chance, not only because of his intelligence, but because of his courage and his ability to inspire those around him. Humans, she realized, were not to be underestimated. Their ingenuity, adaptability, and determination made them formidable in ways the Zypherians had only begun to understand. As they paused by a reflective pool in the gardens, Lyra turned to him. "I always thought I knew you," she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "But today I saw a side of you I could never have imagined. I only act when it is needed." Yet Lyra felt a surge of confidence. With Jonah's mind, courage, and ingenuity, they could face any challenge. Humans, she realized, were a force unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, and she had married one of the finest among them. The night air was cool and still. The palace rested, but the story of the day would echo in the minds of all who witnessed it. Jonas had shown the Zypherians that humans were not merely observers or guests. They were capable of extraordinary action, creativity, and heroism. And Lyra, now fully aware of her husband's true abilities, felt a mixture of pride, respect, and awe that she would carry with her forever. For the first time, she realized that she had not married a humble man simply to share her life with him. She had married a man whose courage, intelligence, and resilience could change the course of history itself. The morning air on Erendor was tense, filled with the quiet hum of activity. Though the city had survived the initial attacks, the threat from the Cravari had not disappeared. Reports indicated that their main fleet was regrouping, reinforced by additional ships and stronger weaponry. Queen Lyra stood on the balcony of the central palace tower, gazing at the horizon where distant ships moved in formation. The calm she tried to maintain belied the worry tightening her chest. Jonas had already begun preparations. The previous battle had shown his brilliance, but he knew the enemy would adapt. The Cravari were not easily defeated, and they were determined to take the palace at any cost. He moved among the command staff, reviewing maps and coordinates, observing sensor data with sharp human intuition. His eyes flicked from one holographic display to another, analyzing the enemy's patterns and anticipating their next moves. "They've learned from the last encounter," he said quietly, not raising his voice but making sure Lyra heard. "Their formation is tighter, their movements less predictable. They'll try to overwhelm the city quickly, focusing on the palace itself. We need to anticipate where they will strike first and turn it against them. We need to take the fight to them, but carefully. Force their leadership into a trap. If we can disrupt their command, we can make the rest of their fleet disorganized and vulnerable." He was thinking on a larger scale now, planning not only to defend but to turn the enemy's strength into weakness. She nodded slowly. "Then we follow your lead. Prepare the strike teams. You will lead the operation." Some were tasked with disabling energy nodes to create false signals, others with striking small, critical points in the enemy formation. Jonah's plan relied on coordination, timing, and unpredictability, all human traits the Zypherians could not fully anticipate. As the Cravari fleet approached, Jonas observed their movements carefully. The enemy commander, a tall, dark-skinned alien with an imposing presence, directed his ships with precision. Jonas studied the patterns, noting the commander's habits and predicting where pressure points might appear. He explained his observations to Lyra and the generals, pointing out vulnerabilities in both the fleet's formation and their reliance on predictable technology. "The commander is overconfident," Jonas said softly. "He expects us to react in certain ways. We will make him think he is in control, then turn that control against him." The first phase of the battle began when the Cravari launched a concentrated strike toward the palace's energy grid. Jonas had anticipated this. He directed small squads to lure the attackers into narrow corridors where their movement was restricted. Energy pulses bounced off crystalline walls, creating false targets that confused the Cravari sensors. Ships collided or were forced to retreat, while Jonah's teams disabled key drones with minimal risk. The second phase required him to move directly into danger. Jonas led a strike team along the outer city perimeter, using hover vehicles to intercept the enemy's forward units. His team moved with careful coordination, striking quickly and retreating before the enemy could counterattack. Jonah's leadership was subtle but effective, giving the impression that the teams acted independently, though every action was part of his larger plan. At one point, a Cravari ship broke through the outer defenses, heading straight for the palace. Jonas noticed it immediately. He assessed the situation, calculating speed, trajectory, and potential escape routes. Without hesitation, he directed a small squad to flank the ship from behind while he maneuvered a hover vehicle to cut it off from the palace. The Cravari crew, expecting an easy strike, found themselves trapped and disoriented. Within minutes, the ship was disabled, neutralized before it could cause significant damage. Lyra watched from the observation deck, her pulse quickening. She had trusted Jonas before, but today she understood fully that his brilliance was unmatched. He did not just react, he anticipated, adapted, and executed with precision. The quiet, humble man she had married was now a battlefield genius, orchestrating actions that protected the palace and its citizens while simultaneously dismantling the enemy's advantage. But the greatest challenge had yet to come. The Cravari commander, recognizing the human's influence, began targeting Jonas directly. His ship moved aggressively toward the city's center, firing precise energy beams that could have destroyed entire squads in moments. Jonas noticed the targeting patterns and adjusted accordingly. He led his team to high ground, using natural terrain and palace structures to shield their movements. From this vantage point, he could observe the commander's maneuvers while coordinating his own attacks. Jonas devised a clever strategy. He instructed several squads to create distractions, false signals, small explosive charges, and decoy movements, while he directed the main counterattack. The enemy commander, thinking he had spotted the key units, took the bait, moving his fleet into a trap. Within moments, energy pulses from hidden positions and coordinated strikes from Jonas, teams disabled critical sections of the commander's ships. The Cravari commander realized too late that he had been outmaneuvered. His fleet, now disorganized, faltered under repeated, unexpected strikes. Jonas continued to adapt, predicting every move, guiding his teams with precision, and exploiting every error. His calmness under pressure, combined with sharp human intuition, created results no Xipherian officer could have expected. Lyra felt her heart swell with pride and awe. The man she had married, who had always seemed modest and quiet, was now demonstrating courage, intelligence, and leadership that surpassed the finest of her own species. He was not just defending the palace, he was changing the course of the battle through human ingenuity. Hours passed, and the Cravari forces began to retreat. Their formation had collapsed, their command structure disrupted, and their morale shaken. Jonas did not relax immediately. He continued to oversee the defenses, ensuring that no stray ships or hidden threats could harm the city. Every decision was precise, efficient, and effective. Finally, as night fell, the battle was over. The city was battered but intact. The palace had survived, thanks largely to Jonah's strategies and leadership. Citizens cautiously emerged from shelters, many whispering about the human who had led squads of both humans and Xipherians to victory. Word of Jonah's heroism spread quickly, and even the hardened generals could not help but acknowledge the human's extraordinary ability. Lyra found Jonas standing quietly in the palace gardens, surrounded by soft glowing flora under the twin moons. He looked as calm as ever, though she knew he had been at the center of chaos for hours. She approached him, her heart filled with admiration. "You were incredible," she said softly, her voice full of awe. "I always believed in you, Jonas, but today I truly understand what you are capable of." His modesty did not diminish the fact that he had turned the tide of battle through sheer ingenuity and human resilience. She had always admired him for his humility and kindness, but now she realized that those qualities hid an extraordinary force capable of heroism beyond imagination. As they walked through the gardens, Lyra reflected on the day. The Cravari would likely return, stronger and more determined. But she felt a surge of confidence, knowing that Jonah's human mind, with its creativity, adaptability, and courage, could face any challenge. Humans were a force unlike any other in the galaxy, and Jonah's embodied the very best of their qualities. For the first time, she understood fully that she had not married a simple, humble man. She had married someone whose courage and intelligence could change the course of history itself. And in a galaxy filled with dangers, that realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. The palace rested under the twin moons, but the echoes of battle lingered in the minds of all who had witnessed it. Jonah's actions had shown the Zypherians that humans were not only allies but heroes, capable of feats that even the most advanced technology could not anticipate. Lyra felt a mixture of pride, respect, and deep admiration for the man beside her. As the night deepened, she took his hand in hers. "You are extraordinary," she said softly. Jonas looked at her, his modest smile never faltering. "I only act when it is needed," he replied. Lyra shook her head, her heart full. "No, Jonas, today you showed that you are more than ordinary. You are brave, clever, and capable of anything. You are extraordinary." Smoke rose from distant city outskirts where the Cravari had tried and failed to penetrate defenses. The air was heavy with the scent of ozone and scorched earth, yet a sense of relief lingered among the palace staff and citizens. For the first time in days, it seemed the city could breathe without fear. Queen Lyra moved through the command hall, checking reports and speaking briefly with her generals. The Zypherians had survived because of careful planning, skill, and bravery, but most of all because of one human, the man she had always believed to be humble, quiet, and ordinary. Jonas had acted with courage, creativity, and intelligence that surpassed even the most advanced Zypherian tactics. He stood near the center of the hall, reviewing the remaining defenses, quietly giving orders where needed. His face was calm, his movements deliberate. There was no trace of pride, only focus. Even after hours of battle, he carried himself with the same modest demeanor that had first drawn Lyra to him years ago. Yet Lyra could see now what she had missed before, the extraordinary ability concealed behind quiet humility. "Jonas," she called softly, drawing his attention. He turned to her, offering his usual modest smile. "Yes, my queen," he replied. "The city owes you more than words can express," she said. Her voice carried both admiration and emotion. "Without your actions, the palace might have fallen, and countless lives would have been lost. You have not only defended Erendor, you have shown all of us the true power of a human mind in action. Without their courage, none of this would have been possible." She realized fully now that she had married not just a kind and thoughtful man, but a hero in the truest sense. Outside the palace, citizens gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed but excited tones. Word of Jonah's role in the defense spread quickly. Some spoke of the clever strategies he had devised, others of the calm courage he had shown when danger pressed close. Across the city, humans and Zypherians alike began to see him not just as an ally, but as a symbol of resilience and ingenuity. The Cravari, realizing that their fleet had been outmaneuvered, retreated beyond the horizon. Their ships shimmered against the light of the twin suns as they disappeared, leaving behind a quiet that was almost surreal after the chaos of battle. Though the threat had not vanished entirely, they could return with reinforcements. The victory had shown that Erendor was not easily conquered. Lyra walked with Jonas through the palace gardens, the soft glow of the luminescent plants reflecting off the pools of water scattered among the paths. The twin moons rose in the sky, casting gentle silver light over the palace and city. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and awe, knowing that the man beside her had changed everything with his intelligence, courage, and humanity. "You were extraordinary," she said softly, stopping to look at him. "I have never seen anyone act with such insight, such bravery. You've done what I thought impossible, and you've done it with humility and grace." "I only act when it is needed. I am no different from anyone else willing to protect what they care for. Today, the palace, the city, and our people owe their lives to your mind and your courage." Jonah's ever humble moved among them, offering guidance, encouragement, and quiet words of thanks. He did not seek praise, yet his actions had earned the admiration of all who had witnessed them. Lyra watched him closely, realizing that this was more than a temporary recognition. Jonas had proven that humans could think in ways that the Zephyrians could not, adapt in real time, and act with courage that inspired others. He had shown that strength was not measured by size, power, or technology alone, but by intelligence, creativity, and heart. She found herself thinking of all the times she had underestimated him, all the times she had believed his humility meant simplicity. Now she saw clearly that his quiet nature had been a disguise for an extraordinary mind. The human she had married was not only capable of great courage, but also of guiding and protecting others in ways she had never imagined. As the celebrations quieted and the night deepened, Lyra called a meeting with the palace council and key officers. She stood at the head of the room, her posture commanding yet full of warmth, and spoke with quiet authority. "Today, we have witnessed the courage and brilliance of one among us, a human who has acted not for glory, but for the protection of our city and our people. Jonas has shown that humans are not simply guests or allies. They are capable of extraordinary action and heroism. I, on behalf of Urindor, recognize his contributions and declare that he shall be honored not only as my spouse, but as a leader and protector of this city." Even those who had doubted him before now understood the truth. Jonah's leadership, strategy, and courage had saved countless lives and demonstrated the full potential of humanity. Jonas, standing quietly, bowed his head slightly. "I am honored, my queen," he said softly, "but I only did what was needed. Without the efforts of everyone here, none of this would have been possible." Repairs were underway, energy grids restored, and citizens returned cautiously to their homes. The palace itself bore the marks of conflict, but it had endured, and in the hearts of the people, a new understanding had taken root. Humans were not merely visitors from another world. They were heroes, thinkers, and problem solvers, capable of turning the tide even against overwhelming odds. Lyra and Jonas walked through the gardens once more, the soft, luminescent light reflecting in the water around them. She felt a deep sense of connection, not just to him, but to the human spirit he embodied. She had always known humans were special, but seeing Jonas in action had shown her just how extraordinary they could be. "You've changed the way I see humans," she said softly, taking his hand. "I always admired your humility, your patience, and your kindness, but today I saw your courage, your intelligence, and your strength. You are everything I hoped for and more. I hope it is enough to protect what we care for." The Kravari might return, the galaxy might bring new threats, but Lyra knew that with Jonas beside her, they could face any challenge. Humans were a force unlike any other, and Jonas embodied their very best qualities: intelligence, courage, creativity, and heart. In the days that followed, Jonas' role in the palace became firmly established. He was consulted not only on scholarly matters, but also on strategy, defense, and diplomacy. The generals studied his methods, incorporating human-inspired tactics into their own training programs. The city looked to him as a symbol of hope and ingenuity. And throughout it all, Jonas remained humble, never seeking glory, always focused on the protection and well-being of those around him. Lyra, now fully aware of his abilities, felt a mixture of admiration, respect, and love deeper than ever. She realized that she had not married a simple scholar, but a man whose courage, intelligence, and ingenuity could inspire a civilization. Humans, she understood now, were extraordinary not because of strength or size, but because of their ability to think, adapt, and act with courage in the face of impossible odds. One evening, as the city recovered and the palace gardens glowed softly under the twin moons, Lyra and Jonas stood together, overlooking the peaceful city. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with awe. Jonas shook his head modestly. "I only did what was needed. You are a hero, not just to me, but to all of Erendor." For Lyra, for Erendor, and for humanity, the future had never looked brighter. And for Jonas, the quiet, humble man who had revealed extraordinary strength when it was needed most, this was only the beginning.